Hey there, Black Friday is here, and it's time to make 2025 your best year ever in English. Check out plainenglish.com/black, BLACK, for our Black Friday specials. Why not hit pause and check it out now before listening? plainenglish.com/black, plainenglish.com/BLACK. The search for life in outer space heads for Europa. Not Europe, Europa. Hi there, I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English, where you can upgrade your English by listening to stories in your new language. And not just listen either. After you listen, you can take a quiz, learn new words, do some exercises, and practice what you learned. This is episode number 732, so that means all the resources that go along with this episode are at plainenglish.com/732. Today, you'll learn about the search for life in outer space and where that search is taking astronomers now. Here's a hint. It's not Mars. In the second half of the episode, I'll show you how to use the English expression slow to a crawl. There are only a few weeks left until 2025. Can you believe it? Now, the great thing about this time of year is that you get to decide what next year is going to be like for you. Now, let me make a suggestion. I suggest you make 2025 your best year yet in English. So before you listen to this episode, take just a second to imagine what your best year in English will look like. Maybe it means you finally put English on your resume or your LinkedIn profile. Maybe it means you turn off the subtitles on Netflix. Or maybe it just means you get the confidence you need to talk to native English speakers. Whatever your ideal 2025 in English looks like, we can help you get there. And there's no better time to do it than right now, Black Friday 2024. So press pause on your podcast player and go to plainenglish.com/black, BLACK, to see how JR and I can help you make 2025 your best year ever in English. plainenglish.com/black, BLACK, plainenglish.com/black, and do it now because our specials end on Monday, December 2nd, 2024. plainenglish.com/black. Now, here's today's story. Is there life in outer space? Does life exist on other planets? Often, the question centers on Mars, one of our neighbors in the solar system. Like Earth, Mars is a rocky planet with moderate temperatures and an atmosphere that could at least plausibly sustain life. There's evidence that there may have been water on Mars in the past. In English, we have a word for a creature from Mars. It's a Martian. There is no such word for life forms on any other celestial body. But now, the search for life is moving beyond Mars, farther out in the solar system. Jupiter has 95 moons, plus thousands of smaller objects orbiting it. Its 4 largest moons are known as Galilean moons. They were discovered in 1610 by Italian astronomer Galileo Galilei. Europa is one of these moons. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, a robotic space mission orbited Jupiter. That mission's findings suggest that there might be a vast saltwater ocean buried under a layer of ice on Europa. The Hubble Space Telescope showed what appeared to be plumes of water vapor escaping Europa's surface. So where there might be water, there might be life. And a new mission to space aims to find out more about conditions on Europa. In October 2024, NASA, America's space agency, launched a spacecraft called the Europa Clipper. Its mission is to orbit Jupiter and study Europa, the moon. The Clipper is equipped with high-resolution cameras to take photographs. It has radar, which will search for water beneath the surface, and it has other instruments, which will measure temperature and the composition of Europa's thin atmosphere. The hope is that the mission will produce a detailed map of the surface and more clues about potential life. The mission will be complicated by the fact that there are high levels of radiation around Europa, levels so high they can damage the observational equipment on board the Clipper. For that reason, the Clipper will orbit Jupiter. It won't orbit Europa itself, and it will take long loops around the red planet, coming close to Europa only 50 times in the whole mission. It's a long shot, but there are scientific reasons to think life might be possible on Europa. First, life requires water, an energy source, and life-sustaining chemicals. Europa might have an ocean. In fact, the ocean might be bigger than the Earth's oceans. There are lots of chemicals on Europa, many of them sourced from Jupiter. Now, what about an energy source? On Earth, the energy source is almost always the sun, directly or indirectly. On Europa, it would be more complicated. Jupiter gets only about 4% as much energy from the sun as Earth does. So astronomers suspect that there's not enough solar energy to sustain life. But there are two other possibilities. First, the gases on Jupiter itself might be a source of energy for ocean organisms on its moon, Europa. And second, there are some very few deep ocean organisms on Earth that survive off chemical energy independent of solar energy. So it's possible that a different energy source could sustain life in Europa's frigid oceans. Speaking of frigid, just how cold is Europa? The surface temperature is minus 160 degrees Celsius. That's cold. Now, here on Earth, water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, but the freezing point depends on both temperature and pressure. Here on Earth, water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, but the freezing point depends on the pressure. On Europa, the frozen surface layer of water could put so much pressure on lower layers that a liquid ocean could exist at temperatures well below 0 degrees. It would take a hardy creature to survive in those conditions. So, a Martian is a creature from Mars. What would we call a creature that lives on Europa? Just ponder that for a while. It's understandable if you're anxious for results, but you'll have to wait a while. The Clipper won't even reach Jupiter's orbit until 2030. It takes almost 5 years to get there. Slow to a crawl is the expression we're going to talk about today. This one first appeared in episode 235, and the episode was about internet service in Africa. What happened was one of the important undersea cables that serves the continent had broken, and Africa relies on just a few of those important cables to connect it to the rest of the world. So I said the speed of the internet slowed to a crawl. Now it's time to learn what that means and how to use it. Slow to a crawl. I'm going to give you a little bit of a break today with an easy expression. I think I've been giving you hard ones lately. This one is just a good one to know, and that is to slow to a crawl. First of all, let's define the word crawl. The easiest way to describe this word is to say this is what a baby does before he or she can walk. You have to crawl before you can walk. That's another good English expression. When something slows to a crawl, it slows down a lot. And we almost always use this with something that is normally fast. And of course, how did you hear it in today's main lesson? You heard that internet service in sub-Saharan Africa slowed to a crawl after the undersea cables connecting Africa to Europe were broken. The internet, which is usually fast, slowed to a crawl. It slowed down dramatically. It was much, much slower after the cable break than before. Another very, very common way to use this expression is when you're talking about traffic on the highway. Remember, you use this when something is normally fast. So if you live on a quiet street, you would never say that traffic slowed to a crawl on your street because traffic doesn't go that fast to begin with. Instead, we say that traffic on major highways slows to a crawl. For example, traffic on I-90 slowed to a crawl after a 3-car pileup closed the right 2 lanes. Normally, traffic on that road goes about 60 miles per hour or about 100 kilometers per hour. But after a 3-car pileup, after a crash involving 3 cars, the 2 right lanes were closed and all the traffic had to fit in just 1 remaining lane. That meant that traffic, normally around 60 miles per hour, was down to only 15 miles per hour for a few miles. Ouch! Traffic slowed to a crawl. It was fast, and then it was much slower. Another thing that can slow to a crawl is progress. Our progress slowed to a crawl after half the team got sick and missed work. Let's hope that's not true this flu season. What's another example with progress? How about negotiations? I don't know how it is where you live, but here in the US, some industries like auto manufacturing, professional sports teams, and hotels have labor unions, and the unions negotiate a contract for all their workers. When a contract is about to expire, they start to negotiate on a new contract. Sometimes those are easy negotiations, sometimes not so much. If both sides have made a lot of progress, if things are looking good, but then there's one sticking point in the negotiations that causes progress to slow down, you might say that negotiations have slowed to a crawl. Here's what you might say. We made fast progress on a number of important issues, but negotiations slowed to a crawl when we began talking about healthcare benefits. That means that when they got to the topic of healthcare benefits, the two sides could not make progress like they could on all the other topics. Negotiations slowed to a crawl. Trade between two countries can slow to a crawl. Trade between China and the rest of the world has slowed to a crawl recently as the country deals with the aftermath of the coronavirus. In Great Britain, they were worried that trade with the EU would slow to a crawl after Brexit. That didn't happen since they have an interim trade agreement that lasts a year. But in a year's time, trade may still slow to a crawl if they don't negotiate a more permanent trade agreement. And that's all for us here at Plain English. This was episode number 732, so you can find the full transcripts, translations, exercises, and practice opportunities at plainenglish.com/732. We'll be back next time with a new topic. See you then. If you like Plain English episodes, you'll love Plain English Plus. It's the perfect way to make 2025 your best year yet in English. And you can see our Black Friday specials by going to plainenglish.com/black. plainenglish.com/BLACK. We've got a whole interactive site that can help you improve your speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And we've just added a new speaking practice tool called the Video Lab. So if you're ready to make 2025 your best year ever in English, then now is the time, because we've got a great Black Friday special. So visit plainenglish.com/black, BLACK, to see the special and get started with Plain English. The specials end on Monday, so don't put it off any longer. plainenglish.com/black. plainenglish.com/BLACK.